Hello there. I know I missed last week. Last week was a little bit crazy for me, so I didn't really have time to make um, week 23. I know that for week of June 16th to the 22nd, I really should be doing week 24. But like I said before, because last week was so crazy, I'm doing week 23 this week, and then I'll do week 24 the next week. But like I said before, at the beginning of the year, sometimes I'll miss or take a break or something with this weekly history videos. So anyway, this is just going to be a short weekly topic, very simple to understand, hopefully. I'm not going to go too in-depth into it, so here we go. For this week is going to be the madness of King George III and the regency. For anyone who knows, well, if you know American history, you know who King George was. He was the last British king to rule over the American colonies before they got independent. If you know your British history, you'll know that he ascended to the throne in 1760, and he eventually went mad, and his son, the Prince of Wales, had to become Prince Regent and stuff like that. But if you don't know that much about British history, then this will be a perfect video for you to at least familiarize yourself with it. I'm not going to go too in depth, like I said before, because I don't have that much time, but I'll try to get through as much as possible. Okay, King George III. This is going to be mainly about his madness. It's not going to be starting with his ascension to the throne in 1760. What happens is the real madness of King George actually starts with the American Revolution ending. With the American War of Independence, it's clear that the British were losing, and once independence was declared, and the British surrendered, the British Army surrendered, I should say. America became free from Britain. Well, that was nice, but the monarch in England at the time, King George III of Great Britain, he did not see it that way. He thought that he could easily, well, let's just say it was a great loss to him. He couldn't grip reality. Like, for instance, he couldn't remember that they were free. He was talking to one of his prime ministers at the time, William Pitt, who was well known in British politics. Pitt the Younger, he's also known as. One movie that I really like, it was made in, I think, '94, called The Maddness of King George III. I think it's called. There's this one scene that I really like in it, where he's talking to Prime Minister Pitt, and he's saying, "As I agree with you with everything," and then he walks over to a globe on his desk, and he turns the globe to North America, and he says, "Apart from the place we should never mention," and he says, under his breath, "The colonists," and Prime Minister Pitt hears it, and he's like, "They're now called the United States, sir." And you could just see that he was like, "Oh yeah, whatever. I'll ignore them. They're nothing to me," you know. So in a sense, you see King George basically, even though what has happened, he's like, "Well, I'm just going to ignore them. They're not existent to me. You know, there's no United States. There's no North America aside from Canada. You know." Even though he said that he would act as they didn't exist, he would constantly keep bringing them up. He would keep bringing them up, saying that, well, we only had to have America and stuff like that, and whenever there was a problem with his ministers, and his ministers would go see him. There's another scene from the movie, I don't know if this is true or not, but it just shows how crazy he was as far as losing the American colonies. Another scene from that movie his ministers and Prime Minister Pitt and some others come to see him with another problem, and King George III sees them, and he's like, "Oh, great! What is it now? America, I suppose." And here you see him harping on America again, and this mainly gets him into madness. He starts to have conversations with himself. He thinks that he's having an affair with a lady of court. He just goes on and on, rants about meaningless stuff, and doesn't even know that he's ranting about meaningless stuff. He'll just talk and talk, and then when someone asks him, "What did you say, sir? Did you say that quite clearly?" He'll be like, "What? I didn't say that." So you see him getting worse and worse through the 1780s and 1790s. Around this time, the Parliament is really divided. In Georgian politics, you have what I like to call the father factor and the son factor of the British Parliament. In the Georgian monarchs had a tendency of son versus father. Whatever politics the father liked and was involved with, the son would go with the exact opposite. In the for example, with the reign of King George III, King George III was a Tory backing king. Tory meaning conservative, except they won't be known as conservatives till 1834, but that's another story. So King George III is pro-Tory, and the Tories have the majority in Parliament during King George's reign. Before and a little bit after the madness, they still have control. Now, the other political factor in Parliament at the time of King George III is the Whig Party, and they're more of a liberal party. They are the opposition party for a while for most of King George's reign, and the king's son, Prince George, he basically is in bed with his father's enemies, not literally but figuratively. He surrounds himself with well-known Whigs like Charles James Fox, and he meets with them, and they have political discussions, and they really try to help him out during the regency. Now, with the regency, once it was discovered that King George III couldn't really govern himself or the country, Parliament had no choice but to enact this regency bill. It was actually put forth twice. The first time it failed. Because King George III recovered for a while, and it seemed to Parliament that he was capable of actually working again, and everything was fine for a while. But very shortly after that, a few years passed, and they had to put him. He went into madness again, and another regency bill went about. This time, the regency bill won out, and the Prince of Wales became the Prince Regent. From that time up until his father's death in 1820, from when he reigned as King George IV from 1820 to 1830. Now, the regency, you see a lot of tension. Prime Minister Pitt still had power at the start of the regency, and as I said before, the Prince of Wales did not like Tories. He sided himself with the Whigs. You had a lot of headbutts between Prime Minister Pitt and the Prince Regent George. And then again, during his Prince Regency, even though the Whigs weren't in power, you had those like Charles James Fox, who influenced the Prince of Wales to move stuff along, and it was just all crazy, and stuff like that. This goes on for the rest of King George's reign, and by 1820, January of 1820 to be exact. He dies at Windsor Castle, and the Prince of Wales is informed that he is now King George IV of Great Britain and Ireland. Like I said before, I didn't have enough time, so this was just a short video. If you have any questions about King George III, mainly during his depression and madness and stuff like that, please make comments or send me a note, private note. So that's it. Sorry if that was a little choppy. I just needed to get this done before I had to do something.